Good morning. Well, after a very long time, I've returned to a town that played a huge part in my early life. It's where I spent the majority of my childhood. This is Chepstow. Beside the River Wye, about 2 miles above its confluence with the River Severn, lies the town of Chepstow. This is the old Wye Bridge, crossing the river between Monmouthshire in Wales and Gloucestershire in England, which once carried the main A48, but now carries local traffic between Chepstow and Tutshill. It is a Grade 1 listed building. Chepstow Castle is the oldest surviving post-Roman stone fort in Britain. It is situated on a narrow ridge between the limestone river cliff and a valley known locally as the Dell. Construction began in 1067 under the instruction of William Fitzosborne. In the 12th century, the castle was used in the conquest of Gwent, the first independent Welsh kingdom to be conquered by the Normans. However, by the 16th century, its military importance had declined, and by the 1700s it had fallen into decay. With the later growth of tourism, the castle became a popular visitor destination. Chepstow Castle is open to the public, and since 1984 has been in the care of CADA, the Welsh Government body with a responsibility for protecting, conserving and promoting the built heritage of Wales. It was in early 1969, sometime before I reached the age of 3, my mum and dad were splitting up. And I stayed with mum, and we came here to Chepstow to live with my maternal grandparents. And we all lived on the edge of an area of Chepstow called Garden City. From the castle, I walked up through the Dell. At the top of the Dell are some of the remains of the Port's Wall, a 13th century stone wall, constructed both for defence and tax collection, by allowing those resorting to the town and its market just one point of access through the wall at the town gate. The Port Wall is a scheduled monument. I went to Port Wall School, which was my old primary school at that time. Well, that whole site hasn't existed for a very long time now, because it was demolished to make way for a housing estate. Then at the age of 11, I went to my comprehensive school, Chepstow School, which at that time was split over 2 sites, Kingsmark and Larkfield. Well, I believe that the Larkfield site has now been demolished and, like my old primary school, is a residential area, so I believe that the whole of Chepstow School now is at the old Kingsmark site. Well, that was the castle and the Dell. Let's go and have a look in the town centre now. The town gate was historically the only landward entrance to the town through the port's wall, and a point where tolls were collected. It was originally built with the wall in the late 13th century. The current archway mainly dates from the 16th century, but has been restored and partly rebuilt on several occasions. It is located at the western end of the High Street and is a Grade 1 listed building. I walked through the arch and down the High Street. Chepstow has a fine war memorial, a column bearing the names of its many victims of the Great War. But, unusually, it also commemorates the conflict with a German naval gun, which was procured from a captured German U-boat that was certainly active around the Welsh coast and the Bristol Channel, and which had inflicted enormous loss of life. The parish and priory church of St Mary was established in 1067, at the same time as the castle. Part of the Norman church remains, but it has been greatly modified over later centuries.
From a very young age, I was always very musical. And when I was about 5 or 6, I was given for Christmas an electric reed chord organ, and I never stayed off that. I played around on that for hours and hours and hours. I learned from sheet music books, and I even messed around and created my own renditions, an early sign of composing my own music. Now, a few years later, I started to learn to play the viola. There were several kids in school that played the violin, but I wanted to be different because no one else played the viola. So I learnt that probably for about 2 or 3 years, but I never really got into it. I never really enjoyed the viola. So I started messing around on my old chord organ more. And eventually, when I was about 13, my mum bought me for Christmas the best Christmas present ever, a proper electronic organ. So I learned to play properly, and I went for lessons once a week. The rest, as they say, is history. Another very important aspect about spending my childhood in Chepstow was that this was where I started going for walks in the countryside. Being close to the mouth of the Wye Valley, Chepstow was a great place to explore lots of lovely footpaths, and there were some great walks near here. There were also 2 long-distance footpaths that started in or near Chepstow. One was the Wye Valley Walk, the other was OFFA'S Dyke Path. Now I'm just going to do a short walk now, which was actually one of the very first walks I ever did, and it actually follows a very short section of OFFA'S Dyke Path.
Walking over the old Wye Bridge, I crossed the river into England. As the road swung left to climb Castleford Hill,
I kept ahead up a walled track. Halfway up, OFFA'S Dyke path joined from the right. At the top, I rejoined the road at the top of Castleford Hill, and continuing along OFFA'S Dyke path, I followed Mopler Road, curved around a bend, and turned left through a kissing gate. OFFA'S Dyke path went straight up the field and past the ruin of a round tower in a garden to the right. It is apparently the remains of a windmill that was renovated as a folly in the 19th century. I soon came to another kissing gate in the corner of the next field, where I entered a walled path leading to a drive. I went right, but after 30 yards turned left through yet another kissing gate and crossed another field to a final gate at the far side.
Well, OFFA'S Dyke path goes off to the right here, but I'm turning left, and I'm now going to follow a walk that we always used to call Fisherman's Walk.
Leaving OFFA'S Dyke path, I turned left into the Lancaut Nature Reserve, which was established in 1971, now managed by the Gloucestershire Wildlife Trust. It is also a site of special scientific interest. After descending steeply, the way briefly levelled at the foot of an abandoned quarry. The stone was loaded into boats, taken down river and used, amongst other things, in the building of Bristol's Avonmouth docks. Soon the path ran alongside the River Wye.
I do remember doing this walk once with a friend from school, and I would have been about 12. It was years before mobile phones were around, and I didn't have a watch until I was a little bit older. So we did this walk, and I remember getting back to Chepstow late. I was 2 hours late. I think I'd agreed to be back at Mum's at 3:30. I didn't get back until about 5:30. But of course I had no idea of the time in those days. But she went for me like a bat out of hell. She really did. But she was worried sick, and that happened quite a lot when I was that age. I think probably that's why one Christmas, not long after that, she bought me a watch.
At the far end of the woods, I reached the deserted village of Lancaut. Today there is little remaining of the village, except for a still working farm and the roofless church of St James, which is a Grade II listed building. The church was built around the 12th century, but was abandoned in the late 19th century. Both the church and village declined after this time, and the church was deconsecrated. In the 1980s, the chancel arch partially collapsed, prompting some restoration and consolidation work, together with archaeological study. Repairs were undertaken to the churchyard wall in 2010. In December 2013, the church building was purchased for a nominal fee of £1 by a local preservation trust, which intends to carry out a programme to stabilise the building. From the church, I climbed the hill to eventually reach the edge of Woodscroft, where I came to a short track that led to a most dramatic viewpoint. Wintour's Leap is named after Royalist Sir John Wintour, who, hotly pursued on his horse by parliamentary forces, according to local myth, survived a leap off the cliff, and landing safely in the Wye below, swam to safety in the nearby Chepstow Castle. In fact, Wintour did escape from the Roundheads by using the river nearby on 2 separate occasions, but from less spectacular positions at Lancaut and Sedbury. A few yards beyond here, I rejoined OFFA'S Dyke path, passing behind the cottages above the dangerously high cliff. I continued to follow OFFA'S Dyke path back in the direction of Chepstow.
Well, I'm now back at the junction of paths where I turned off to leave OFFA'S Dyke path earlier and followed the path along Fisherman's Walk. So all I've got to do now is retrace my steps along OFFA'S Dyke back to Chepstow. Well, I'm just approaching Chepstow again now, so I'm nearly back at the start of my walk. But I can't begin to tell you how wonderful it's been doing this walk today. It's been really nostalgic and brought back some great memories for me. This really was one of the very first walks I ever did when I was growing up in Chepstow. It's what got me into walking in the first place, so to do it again today has been absolutely brilliant. Now, I lived in Chepstow, I think, for about 12 years, so I did spend most of my childhood there. 9 years we lived at my grandparents' house in Garden City, and then Mum and I moved out and got our own rented house in the Bulwark area of Chepstow, and we were there for about 3 years. And then Mum got a job which actually ended up moving premises, and that's when we left Chepstow and moved to Portishead. But I have to say it's been lovely looking around Chepstow again today. The place hasn't changed. Yes, there are a few differences, there have been some new developments since I left it all those years ago, but generally Chepstow hasn't changed at all.